Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. I figured today would be a great opportunity to be able to go into the Bitcoin chart, go into Ethereum, as well as the total market cap and give you guys my exact plan for the way that I believe the market is going to be headed over the next week. This is going to be a time where the market is going to experience a lot of volatility, either to the downside or the upside, but I'm going to be breaking down and giving you guys my specific opinion for the direction that I think the market is going to be going, bull or bear. And then we're going to be finishing up today's video by talking about Pulsechain and Hex. Pulsechain is finally launched. We're going to be going over different opportunities inside of the market, different ways that you guys can actually learn and actually participate inside of this network, and ultimately why I believe that this is one of the very best crypto opportunities going into this next cycle. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and with that being said, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty guys, so here we are to start off today's video, and we're going to be quickly touching up a little bit on what we talked about in yesterday's video. Now, everything I talked about in yesterday's video is pretty much played out, where we ended up topping up here and we're pulling back down to this support range. We don't know if it's going to hold a support, we don't know if it's truly support yet, but that's where we're coming back down to. And so now the question is going to be, are we going to hold this as support? Can that potentially set us in for a higher high before us actually running back up to that resistance? Because this resistance near $29,000 and $30,000 is a very important one. As long as we're below it, we're bearish. If we can actually get a retest back above that, ultimately that's going to set us in for the potential of a breakout. But until we are confirming a breakout above this level, until we are really flipping this as support, I'm personally not really going to be thinking too much on any sort of bounces to the upside. And if anything, if you're willing to take long positions in here, if we do end up getting a buyback, then that could be a good long opportunity, considering we had this massive capitulation. We did swipe below the range lows as support. And so if we reclaim this as support, that could be a good opportunity to actually swing trade back up into the range highs. So do I think that we're going to be a go ahead if we start breaking back out? Well, if we get back above 29,000, in my opinion, then we can start talking about a breakout. But until then, any sort of bounce to the upside, I'm mainly looking to fade for the most part. Now, one other thought here is getting into Ethereum. In my opinion, this is one of the more telling signs when it comes to cryptos, just because when I look at the chart of Ethereum, it really doesn't look as good in any sort of way. Now, we are having the potential of a bounce in here, and that's across the board. We can see that with Bitcoin as well. If we end up seeing a buyback, we have a very real opportunity of running back up to the range highs, which if that's the case for ETH, chances are we're going to be running back up to at least this mid-range point, probably around $1,940. That's kind of where I would bet Ethereum would bounce to, but it really isn't any sort of confirmation either way, because here's the problem. We had this move outside of this 300-day range, but we instantly closed back below it, and then when we went back and retested it, this ended up being a lower high. And so thus far, all of our market structure has been lower high, lower low. We've started the beginning stages of what looks to be a downtrend, but the problem is we don't have true confirmation. Even though we did make this retest all the way back down in here, we came all the way back down to support, but we never actually closed below it. We had this big flush below, but we always ended up holding support. And so now with this bounce coming in, we haven't had a confirmed breakdown. We did have this first lower high here, but because we never were able to break down of support in this move, we didn't technically get a lower low from that. So as it stands, Ethereum itself is kind of in, no man's land, I would say, where I'm anticipating that it really could see a bounce right in here, back up to, like I said, $1,940. And then if that's the case, we would expect that Bitcoin's going to end up holding support and most likely make a run back up to the range highs. Now, when we're getting over here into the total market cap, this was a fractal that I kind of shared with you guys a little bit about, but we only talked about it a couple times. Now, what we talked about was how in this consolidation, basically in January and February, we ended up having this consolidation where Bitcoin broke out of the range highs. This ended up being a bull trap, and then we instantly sold back down and ended up clearing the range lows as well, and it was a bear trap. So this is what's called an expanded flat correction, and we talked about the potential that the same thing could actually be forming right now. Now, the only problem with this is, like I stated, the same thing with Ethereum and the same thing kind of with Bitcoin right now. Even though all of these charts swipe below their supports and we went way below that range, every one of them rebounded. So it wasn't really a confirmed breakdown. Even Ethereum, We had this big wick that came in here, but we instantly rebounded and we reclaimed the bottom end of these wicks. And so as it stands, nothing is actually broken down. Yeah, Ethereum did have a lower high, but there is the potential that you could write this up as being some wonky looking ABC correction. Do I think that that's the likely scenario? No, not necessarily, but I'm just kind of giving you guys my rough thoughts on the way that I'm perceiving the market. When I'm looking at the total market cap, we're kind of at this exact same moment of time where we're more or less in the same range. But now the question comes, are we going to hold this or are we going to break down? Because this first green line that I had, notice here how we did actually end up closing back below. And then when we did get that big wick, we ended up still closing below support right inside of this range. And then even with this most recent wick here, both candle bodies are still closing below the support. The problem with this comes in the way that when we're drawing support and resistance, we have to count these wicks in here as well. And that's kind of what we've seen up to this point. Even though the candle bodies have initially closed outside of this first one, they're still closing above our low end of these wicks down in here, which tells me that there's still the very real potential that this entire thing right here is just a bigger range. And if we were to ultimately hold support down in here, reclaim this one, then that could actually set us in for a reversal point where, you know, Bitcoin obviously holds support here, rallies back up to the range highs, and then the total market cap would do something similar, you know, of the likes. I don't know if it would come all the way back up to the range highs up here, or whether it would kind of come into the mid-range point like what I was drawing with Ethereum, coming up to $1,942. But that's kind of what I'm going to be watching for in the short term. If the market gets way more bullish, and then this entire move ends up not playing out like I've been drawing it, and this entire sort of correction just ends up being more of a shorter lived one before that next leg up, then obviously we'd be targeting something completely different. But until that really happens, I'm just going to be watching this with Bitcoin. Because here's the thing, guys. We've had the same analysis for basically a month, probably over a month at this point. We've been drawing the exact same thing. We've known that if we were going to be bullish, we had to get back above about $29,000, hold it as support, and then that would set us in for new highs. But the problem has always been, every time we've gotten up to that range, we've rejected and fallen lower. Now, with this most recent sell-off, even though we ended up short-term clearing that support and then coming all the way down to 25K, that was kind of what I've been watching for, was a move down to this 25K range. So now that we've actually done that, I really won't be surprised to see us make that next leg back up to the range highs, even if it's just further consolidation, even if it's just chop, even if we don't break out and it just leads to more sideways price action. That's kind of what I'm going to be watching for, because at the end of the day, I was bearish up here at the range highs, and so there's no sense in necessarily getting super bearish at the range lows of support, because we need to see if these are going to hold or not. The more likely scenario is that support holds in the same way that every single time we've hit this level, the price has bounced. So unless this ends up flipping, we're going to know when that happens. Because if we see a massive rejection come in here, which we haven't up to this point, the pullback that we're seeing is pretty, small, and it would be kind of typical to what you would be expecting if we were to see bullish continuation to the upside. And so if we were to see some nasty, rejection candle like this, then we would be looking for the potential of making that next leg lower in our cycle. But as it stands, the attempt at breaking down below the support wasn't long-lived. The bulls immediately rebounded, and now the question comes, are they going to hold support? So that's what I'm watching for Bitcoin. I'll continue to give you guys some updates as we go from there. But until then, there's really only so many things I can tell you guys about the direction that Bitcoin is headed. Same thing with ETH. ETH is going to bounce if Bitcoin bounces, and that's kind of what I'm watching with both of those. And with this, we're at the final leg where we're either going to hold support and make that next big drop, which if we break support here and make that lower low, it's going to be a big one, and I do believe it will happen very fast. However, we're kind of at that last line of defense where if we do end up holding support where we're at, this ends up reversing, then we could actually be looking at a reversal point. Now, guys, let's talk about Pulsechain. Let's talk about Hex. Let's get into this market cycle, because I really do think that this is one of the bigger opportunities coming, and there's huge opportunities right now because of how early Pulsechain actually is. Now, right off the bat, guys, if you've been watching my channel, you know that I've been holding Hex. I've been bullish on Hex, even when everybody was bearish. So everybody was actually buying all of these tokens down in here. They were buying the rumor of Pulsechain launching, because everybody knew that once Pulsechain went live, everybody that was holding Hex was going to get a duplicated version, right? And so that's kind of the thing that everybody was talking about. Everybody wanted to get their double duplicates worth of Hex. Everybody was speculating on if they would have real value inside of the Pulsechain ecosystem, or, nobody really even knew. It was just kind of a gamble. So we ended up seeing such a big rise in price, which is typical, and that's actually why I was buying it throughout this period. I expected that the price of Hex was going to rise as Pulsechain was coming to launch. Now we can see here that Pulsechain launched and we saw this candle right here. We had this big move to the upside. People were ultimately getting really excited. There was probably a little bit of insider trading at the same time with people who knew Pulsechain was about to go live. And so that's kind of why we ended up seeing this pump. And then instantly after, Hex sold off. And the reason why is because everybody that was buying, just simply trying to get their duplicated tokens on Pulsechain, they ended up selling all of those instantly after. So that's kind of why we saw this big capitulation. Now, for everybody that's wondering, is Hex dead? It's obviously not dead. And what Hex reminds me so perfectly of is if we come all the way back to the COVID capitulation for Bitcoin. And this is more or less what I mean. So when we're looking at the price of Bitcoin in its very first cycle, we saw almost the exact same sort of consolidation where we have this kind of build-up phase. Pretty much the same thing that happened there. We get our next leg up. This was our wave 3. This was our wave 3 for Hex. We get this decline here. This one happened here. And then that leads to our blow off top. And the same thing happened for Hex. The price structure is obviously going to look different, but this is typical in any market cycle. Whether this is a short-term kind of mini echo cycle where we get this big parabolic rally and then a sharp decline, or whether this is an entire bull run, because obviously this was just the first leg up for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin went all the way into new all-time highs after. But what I'm trying to share with you guys is what we saw here for Bitcoin. We corrected all the way back down. We started to find support, and we even broke out of this descending resistance. Everybody kind of assumed that it was bullish from that point. And then that's what led us to this final capitulation right here. And this capitulation was one of the gnarlier ones that we've ever seen. If we're looking at Bitcoin, this was a 72% correction, and this was the first higher high in the whole cycle. So it was really unforeseen before. And that's why it caught so many people off guard. Now with Hex, even though we didn't have COVID, we had the perfect black swan event being the Pulsechain launch. Everybody took profits and everybody just basically sold their Hex because the only reason they were buying in the first place was just waiting to get duplicated versions copied over on Pulsechain. So we saw the same exact sort of capitulation here. We have the descending resistance, we break out, everybody thinks we're bullish, and then that leads us to this final capitulation to the downside. And now that's where I believe that we're at right now. Now, what is the consolidation going to look like? I can't tell you guys. I don't know how long it's going to take or spend down in here. But I think that this is a huge opportunity for Hex. If you're somebody that's been wondering when to get in, I don't think you can really go wrong getting in here, because now it's, at the exact same price that I first bought it over here in about 3 cents. So it's a huge opportunity considering the fact from the high that it just made all the way down to here, that's 80%. So you had a huge opportunity to get back in on this dip. I know most people are not going to be buying on this dip. I already know that because of how gnarly the correction was, but this is where all of this opportunity is made in the market. If you're somebody that's bullish on Hex and you're not going to be willing to buy down in here, there's no reason to even be investing, because this is the only way you're ever going to be able to make a profit, is if you're actually able to buy whenever the time comes in where everybody doesn't want to buy, you feel sick to your stomach, you just watched as you bought up here or you bought in this lower point, you thought that you were good, and then the whole market's down another 40%. But that happens. I did that in COVID. I remember how scary that was. I accumulated thousands and thousands of dollars worth of positions, and then COVID happened, and I was down 60% on most of those. So I know what that's like, but that's just part of the game. We never know when these opportunities are going to come in. And with Pulsechain launching, I wouldn't say that this is any sort of thing to be worried about by any means, because everything has to do with the fact all of this added sell pressure is just because of the launch of Pulsechain. Now everybody's kind of been asking me about Pulsechain. How do we chart it? What do we do? How do we look at it? And to be quite honest, guys, the problem with Pulsechain is really the fact that there's no real liquidity out there, and it just started. Like if we come over here, if you guys go on Twitter and look up Richard Hart, he's a good person to actually look at for any sort of information on Pulsechain. But he tweeted this, and it makes a lot of sense, because this is almost the problem that I think everybody's having right now. I'm blocking so many people. You don't have well-functioning real money markets for PulseX, Pulse, or anything on Pulsechain yet. They take time to gather liquidity. Everything will be highly volatile for a while. People can't even find ways to shovel their money into the system yet. So that's kind of exactly what we're seeing right now for the entirety of Pulsechain and its ecosystem. But for me, whenever I'm looking at wrapped Pulse, this is the only way that I've been able to actually chart the price of Pulsechain. And to be honest, I don't even know if this is accurate. There's really just not enough money even moving around, period. So yeah, there's not enough liquidity, but it's really just the fact that everything is just the very beginning and there's no real money markets for these entire things. So there's no liquidity to trade. There's no real ways to trade in and out of anything. So it's kind of just this big wild west right now. And it reminds me a lot of like the early days of crypto where there really wasn't anything going for any of these. There was no liquidity. There wasn't anything. They all had to bootstrap everything from the ground up. And that's actually why I really think that Pulsechain is a huge opportunity. Because as it stands, most people can't even buy it even though they want to. And there would be a lot of people buying it right now. So that is the opportunity in and of itself. It shows you that even though we can't buy it, there's a lot of people that wish they could. And when that opportunity comes in where there is liquidity and sufficient liquidity to buy, I expect that the price is going to ultimately go up. But the only way that you can actually chart the price of Hex, the only way that you can actually chart the price of Pulsechain is through wrapped Pulse. So you have to type in WPLS because the ticker is PLS. And then you can come down in here and there's a few different charts here. Now, if we're looking at the highest liquidity, the Pulsex and wrapped Pulse has the highest liquidity at like 28 million. And it's also one of the oldest. And so if you click over here, this will give you guys, this chart. Now there's a few different ones that we're going to be looking at. And, there's only on a 5-minute time frame. So there's almost no price history. We don't even know what the heck's happening with these. If we come over here, we can look at this one being the Hex chart, and we can see that it pretty much looks the same. And so I would imagine that these two charts are fairly accurate, being that they have the most liquidity going for them. At the very least, I think these are probably the most accurate ones, and that is just compared against Hex or Pulsex. And those make sense because those are really the first markets that went live for Pulsechain. So when we're watching this, this is all of the price history we have. We don't really have much. And so whatever the Hex price, and really, I think Hex is going to do good because of the fact we already had this big capitulation. Anybody that's buying in here, in my opinion, will be greatly rewarded for doing so. But when we're looking at this, we need to see Bitcoin bottom. If Bitcoin and the rest of the markets bottom here, total market cap bottoms and all of that, then we're going to expect to see Pulsechain start going up too. The real problem is, I wouldn't really be worrying too much about these prices and these valuations, because they're really not even real. Right now we can't trade. Most people can't buy anything. And so I wouldn't be too worried about anything. The bridge is now live, so you can technically bridge over to the Pulsechain network if you want to. If you guys want to find out information on that, you guys can go to pulsechain.com. You guys can actually add the network to your MetaMask. As far as bridging, I probably wouldn't. I'd wait a little bit because of the fact, like I stated, we don't know how all of this stuff is going to work. There's really not liquidity. You probably don't want to worry too much about, getting front run on transactions or potentially just not having enough liquidity to trade, taking a high slippage trade, something along those lines. I would just wait for everything to kind of settle down because the opportunity is still going to be there. If we can't even move our money around, nobody else can really move their money around. So there's not really that much going on. I don't think we need to get too ahead of ourselves because that'll cost us more money in the long term. We just went live. Let things kind of settle down. Give it a couple weeks, maybe give it a couple months. But regardless, I think that if you don't own any Pulsechain and you've been wondering how to buy it, I literally don't have a good answer for you other than come over here, type in WPLS, go to one of these charts that I'm telling you, either the Hex PLS or the PLSX or PLS, which is Pulsex. Either way, these two logos right here with the X and the highest liquidity, 4.3 million, or liquidity, 29 million, and then Hex was this one right over here. So I would look at either two of these pairs. And then if you're looking on Deck Screener, if you notice here on the right-hand side, it says Trade on Pulsex. You can come to this right icon, and that'll actually click that, and it'll pull up the whole link to their website. So you guys, I will link Pulsex into the website. I will link this. I will link this in the description, so you guys don't have to go through all the loopholes that I just did. But if you guys do want to figure out how to buy this, the only place to buy this that I know of is Pulsex, and I don't know what the liquidity is. So I might even wait. I don't know. I don't know. Look it up. Maybe set your slippage really low, and so the transaction might just fail if it's not going to go through, and then that'll kind of give you an idea. But it should tell you what the liquidity is going to look like. I haven't connected to it because I don't have any of my wallets right now. But regardless, I'm going to put all the links in the description for anybody that's looking out. This is the place where I would go. These are the different apps that I would use. I will link deck screener links in the description as well so that you guys can actually find the charts. But as of right now, there's just not a lot of information. So I do want to give you guys more information, more updates as we go, but there just isn't a whole lot, and I just wanted to give you guys the bare minimum that I could right now based off of what I do know. So if you found value in this, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell if you guys want to join the Discord server, follow the trades. You know, we talked about Pulsechain. I posted it in my Discord server, so if you guys ever wanted to be able to follow along with what I'm doing, where I'm investing my money, pre-sales, anything of the likes, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up on my website. Thank you all so much for the support. And with that being said, I will catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.